So now we're on the armrest, and we have to notch these out on the back side of the armrest itself. So the first thing I do is I pick which side I want up or to show. Once I have that, I'm going to lift this one up this way, this one up this way, and then butt them together. Now I can load in my square. Now I have my rip fence set at 3.5 inches to the back side. Remember the back side of the blade. And my blade is up 1.5 inches. So I can go ahead and run these through. Okay, so now I have to adjust the saw, and I'm going to bring the blade up as far as it'll go. And then I've got to adjust my rip fence to 1.5 inches. Again, remember, and this is important, 1.5 inches on the back side of the blade, not the front side. So now that I have that set, I'm going to grab my piece of wood. And then I'm going to clamp the wood onto my sacrificial. Make sure everything's square. And then I'm going to run that through. Okay, now again, my blade wasn't big enough to cut all the way to the top of the notch. So I'm just going to take a jigsaw and finish the notch here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the belt sander and kind of round these over. These edges right here. You can do that. I'm going to do it on a belt sander, but if you just want to do it with a round over bit, that'll work just as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and head over there and do that real quick. So there we go. Pretty easy. If you chose the round over method, that's awesome. Whatever you want to use is fine. Just remember to put yourself a piece of sacrificial so you don't have any tear out on the end grains there. Okay, so I'm just kind of dry fitting the armrest on there. On the bottom side, I'm just making an outline of where it's going to be attached, because I want to drill a couple pilot holes in there before I put the 3-inch deck screws in. So now that I have that outline, I'm just going to measure a 3/4 inch using my combination square. And I'm just going to put 2 pilot holes in here. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to countersink the top of those two pilot holes I just made. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. Just again, dry fit it on and then make the outline again. So now I got the 2 screws in there to hold this down. So now I want to put 2 3-inch screws on the back side here. And again, I got my combination square set to 3/4 inch. So I'm going to make 2 marks, pilot hole, and then put the screws in. So I should probably say I'm going to pilot hole and then countersink. Don't forget the countersink. So the next thing I want to do is I want to cut a semicircle in the back of the chair. This is the back here that I made. These are 4 3/4, should total 19 inches. So I'm going to be using this jig that I made. This is a circle jig. I'll post the link for it down in the description. I just made it actually for this particular project, as a matter of fact. But I tested it out and it works great. So I'm just going to line it up and then I can just put the screw down and I can cut my semicircle. So I'm making sure that I cut on the back side, because there is one of the screws that I put in and just a hair of it is sticking out. So it does cause just a little bit of an indent when I go across, and you know what, that's okay. It can be sanded out pretty easily. But otherwise, you know, this thing works just great. And that's the reason why I didn't do the round over on the arms is because I already have my router loaded with the bit that I need to cut this semicircle, and I'm too lazy to change it out. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and cut this semicircle. Now you want to make sure that you have a piece of scrap under there. We'll get this all set up. It is going to require multiple passes. So I'm going to start shallow and then just make another pass a little deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay, so it took a couple batteries, but I mean, it did what I wanted it to. That's a perfect semicircle. So my jig works great. Now I need to attach the back to the chair. So let's get the chair back up here and get that done. So first I'm going to do a dry fit. Make sure that it fits in there. Because regardless of how perfect your measurements are, you know you're always 1/8 of an inch off somewhere. Okay, so my chair back is 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch. Too big for the 19 inches that I put in here. So what I want to do is I want to shave off a 1/16 on both sides. I don't want to just take 1/8 inch off of one side, because that could throw off the look of my semicircle. So I'm going to set this up to just take 1/16 off. And then I'm going to flip it around and take a 1/16 off the other side and do another dry fit. All right, so I got one side pushed through. Now I want to push the other side through. And again, I want to take that last 1/16 of an inch off. So there we go. I have a really good dry fit now. Whatever I took off of one side, I took off of the other. So I maintained that perfect semicircle. So now what I want to do is I want to put some 3-inch screws to hold the back on, and I want it flush with the front. So I'm going to get that lined up and then put a clamp on it and get some screws in there. Now I'm going to put the screws in at 3/8 of an inch, which is half of the 3/4 inch back I have on here. So now that I have my back flush with the back piece of wood here, I'm going to make a mark at 3/8 of an inch, probably about 4 inches deep. So I have the clamp on, so now I can go ahead and put my pilot hole, and then I want to put a countersink and then put a 3-inch screw in there. Alright, so I got a screw in here. Now I'm going to put one at 3/8 inch, probably about, again, 4 inches up down here on the bottom, so I know that this back will be held in place. Okay, so I got 2 screws in, so I know that it's held. So I'm going to put 2 more in, again about every 4 inches. So I'm going to pilot hole 2 more, countersink, and put 2 more in. Okay, now I can flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. So it's coming together. So the last thing I want to do is, you may be asking yourself, why did you make the back so big that there's so much scrap? Well, that's not really scrap. We're actually going to put that piece right here. So if you followed my measurements, this is 8.5 inches, and here we have 10 inches. So let's go ahead and cut this at 8.5, and that piece is going to go right in there. It's going to make it look beautiful, sexy. All right, so that's what it'll look like. So I'm going to throw some pocket holes on the back of this, just a couple here, and maybe 3 on here, and then I'll get it screwed down. All right, so the very last step before we start sanding this monster is we need to put a couple braces on the back. So these are, I cut these at 19 inch and I just grabbed a couple pieces of scrap, and I want to put a 3-inch screw in this side and this side, and then I'm going to do the same from the top with my 4-inch spacers. And I want to be able to put screws in from the front into this piece of wood so it secures it. So let's start by getting these 2 braces set up on the back, and then we'll flip it over and we'll put the screws in on the front. Okay, so I'm going to pilot hole, countersink, and then put the 3-inch screw in. And I am going to need a combination square for this. So I want it to be right in the middle. So I got 10.5, it looks like. I'm sorry, I got 2.5. Okay, so I know that that's 3/4. So I'm just going to back it up 3/8 of an inch. And that should put me right into the middle of this piece of wood. So I'm going to use it to make my mark on this side and then drill the pilot hole. Countersink. All right, so I'm going to go repeat the same process on the other side. All right, so I'm going to put the final back brace on. I know I kind of have the chair in an awkward position here, but it's easier for me to get the screw in. So I cut a couple 15-inch spacers. So I'm measuring 15 inches from the top of the brace that I put on. And now I want to do the same thing where I pilot hole, and then I want to countersink, and then I'm going to put a 3-inch screw in there. So I don't know if you can see it, but I also have a clamp with a piece of wood there just to hold it so it doesn't slide off. So now I want to put a line of screws across the front here, pilot hole, countersink, etc., etc. So I know that I used a 4-inch spacer, and I know that piece of wood behind here is 1.5 inches. So that means I'm going to measure up 4 inches plus 3/4 of an inch, and I should be dead center on that piece of wood. So now I can use this framing square to just lightly draw a line across. I want my screw line nice and straight. Okay, so now that I have my screw line, I'm going to go ahead and put in 4 pilot holes. And then countersink those 4 holes. Now the reason why countersinking is so important is we're going to be putting putty to cover the holes. So countersinking will be able to get the putty into that hole, and it will hold better. Now I'm just putting in some 1.25 inch deck screws here. So now I want to put a line of screws across the top brace. Now I'm kind of blind when it comes to that top brace because I can't really see it, and I don't have an exact measurement for it, but I can use a combination square, and I can go on the back side of my chair back and push it until it hits that piece of wood, at which point I can make a mark. Now if I put another mark, again, 1.5 inches, if I put another mark at 3/4, I should be centering that piece of wood. So I will use my framing square, nice light line all the way across. So now all we got to do is put a pilot hole, countersink, and put in another screw. Just going to do a quick sand to get the pencil lines off of there. So before I do my finish sanding, I want to putty all of my screw holes. So I'm using the DAP plastic wood, and I like to just kind of work it in my fingers a little bit before I put it on. May not be necessary. I enjoy it. So I got all the holes filled. Now I just got to wait for the putty to dry, and then I can start sanding. Project like this, sanding's probably going to take a while. After I'm done sanding, then I have to pick what seal or what finish I want to put on this. I'm thinking I'll probably just go with the urethane. So that's it. You're at the last step. It's pretty much done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new episodes as they become available. If you're new to the woodworking hobby, check out my Woodworking for Beginners video series, 12-part series. Really simple projects. It just gives you the basics of woodworking. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments section. I will get to them as soon as I can. If you would like to support my channel, I'll put a link in the description for donations. Another big help, share me on your social media pages. That is definitely helpful. So until next time, keep it safe.